there to make sure it was Okay, I think we are ready to begin as we're getting everything set up. Starting a couple of minutes early, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. And right off the bat, if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like me to address or anything you'd like to say, please feel free to leave it in the chat. But we've got a lot of stuff going on right now. Especially, we'd have some news breaking this evening that Salt Lake City may have found a way to block the new or the proposed ICE facility on the west side of the city in that giant warehouse that was purchased by Department of Homeland Security, DHS. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. It's a pretty clever gambit that Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall has come up with to try and block that. We'll discuss that. We'll also discuss the status of the Prop 4 repeal. It is hanging on by its fingernails. It is still looking to... it is still, as we speak right now, still has enough signatures to qualify for the ballot, but it is really close. And if one Senate district, and right now it's Senate District 15 is what they're looking at, but if one Senate district drops below the threshold, then it doesn't make the ballot. So we'll talk about all of that this evening, but we'll let everybody get in. Join us on the stream tonight. I'm very happy to have you along for the ride. And if you, again, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the chat and I will try to get to them as soon as possible. Also want to take a moment to give a shout out to my fan club of idiots and morons over on Elon Musk's website, formerly known as Twitter. This is how I know that I'm starting to make an impact with my reporting. These people who are really just the stupidest people on the planet are now starting to target me in their impotent rage, calling me names, trying to discredit my reporting, and that just tells me, I'm starting to make an impact with what I'm doing here with Utah Political Watch, because these people, they're idiots, they're cowards, they are the stupidest people on the planet. As I like to say, they are the left side of the bell curve, and it's hilarious to watch them try and discredit my reporting just because, I tend to point out the truth and also tend to point out where their hero, Senator Mike Lee, is wrong. And just imagine for a second how pathetic you have to be a beta to Senator Mike Lee. I mean, if you are playing Reek to Senator Mike Lee, Game of Thrones reference, you need to spend some time looking in the mirror because your life is being wasted, buddy. But these people, it's nice to have them on board as well. I'm starting to make an impact. And so it's always fun to know that they are paying attention to what I'm doing because it tells me I'm on the right path. So anyway, that's wanted to get that off my chest. How's everybody doing this evening? We are, I'm really freaked out about the weather. It should not be this warm in March. I'm spending time having to work out in my yard because the grass is starting to wake up. I did not expect this until next month. And so that's scaring me a little bit. And if you look at how low the snowpack is around the state, we're in for a very, very brutal summer. And I'm really worried about where we are going with that. So anyway, But I hope you guys had a great weekend. A little bit of an update. I know some of you are following along with the health of my dog Murphy. She's bouncing back a little bit after some really scary seizures. She had cancer in her nasal cavity. Some of it started to get into her brain. We knew seizures were always a possibility because of the radiation treatment. It was a specialized radiation treatment to help her out and to hopefully kill those cancer cells, but they had to run little filaments into the part of her skull where the cancer had started to spread. And they warned us that seizures were always going to be a possibility, but we had gone several months without them. So it was a shock and a surprise when she had those last weekend, but she seems to be rebounding a little bit. She's, still, they took a lot out of her and we're just, always on the edge of our seat around her, but everything seems to be going well. For now, fingers crossed. I watched a good movie the other night. Watched it with my wife, and my wife and I have decidedly different tastes in films. But we watched a film called Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die with Sam Rockwell, and it was a delightful little film, delightful little meditation on AI, on technology, and just how it's taking over our lives. If you have, I don't want to spoil it, and I can't really talk about it without spoiling it. But I'm a huge Sam Rockwell fan, and the opening scene is kind of a tour de force with him. But the whole film is quite great, so I highly recommend that. If you have a chance to watch it, it's called Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Much better than The Long Walk, which I got schnockered into watching because although I enjoy Mark Hamill and he was good in the film, the rest of the film was just kind of caca poo. I did not enjoy it at all. My wife actually the next day said, "Was there actually a point in that film?" And I have to agree with her. That really didn't. I just didn't get it. So Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. Thumbs up from me. The Long Walk. Nah, probably wouldn't watch that one again. All right, let's get down to the news about politics this evening and what's happening here in Utah. And if you haven't heard, but the Salt Lake City Council, they are working on passing an ordinance to clamp down on non-residential facilities on how much water they use. And this could potentially be used to block the new ICE facility on the west side of Salt Lake City. In the statement that Mayor Mendenhall issued this evening, and I'm reading here, says, yesterday I transmitted a proposal to the Salt Lake City Council to update Title 17 and Title 21A of the Salt Lake City Code, which pertain to daily water allowances for non-residential uses. New large water users are particularly problematic due to Salt Lake City's worsening drought conditions and water conservation needs, which we're already taking action to address. Just last week, I directed Salt Lake City and our entire service area to move to Stage 2 of our water shortage contingency plan. As mayor, a primary responsibility I have is to ensure residents have access to clean water, reliable utilities, and safe infrastructure. Put simply, a potential high occupancy facility interferes with those needs. While we lack direct information from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, a 7,500 person detention facility on our city's west side would likely use 1 to 2 million gallons of water per day. By comparison, the warehouse recently purchased previously used about 5,600 gallons per day. Should they be approved, these water usage updates would enact tighter restrictions on all government entities, ensuring that the amount of water new commercial and industrial developments can use is in line with our city's capacity. And so this would impact any non-residential development that uses more than an average of 200,000 gallons of water per day. So this is sort of a clever way to potentially block this ICE facility the warehouse that was recently purchased by Department of Homeland Security on the west side of Salt Lake City. So it's kind of a clever, it's an extremely clever move, and this is sort of becoming the hallmark of Mayor Mendenhall. If you remember last year, after Trevor Lee passed his pride flag ban, they found a pretty big glaring loophole and just drove right through it, forcing the legislature to come back this year and close that loophole. But she's finding, again, if this goes through, and I have no reason to believe that the Salt Lake City Council will not approve it, if this goes through, it could potentially block that. Emma Jolo on YouTube says, yeah, but I can also see them not giving the detainees any water. But you need water for sanitation needs, and I know what people are going to say, but there are needs besides giving water to the detainees that they're going to need to run a facility of that size. You just can't get around it, and this is going to clamp down on it. And it's got the potential. They're on pretty strong footing, saying we are in a drought right now, and putting this new facility in Salt Lake City with 7,500 beds, holding 7,500 people, using 1 to 2 million gallons of water per day. That's just not good for anybody else. So it's a pretty clever workaround. We'll see where it goes from there, but it's clearly an innovative thing that someone in government is trying to do to block this, and you kind of have to tip your hat to her for coming up with this way to potentially block this facility. Anywho. So that's some breaking news that happened just this evening. Mayor Mendenhall sent out that statement that I read, and it looks like the city council is getting ready to pass this new ordinance that would clamp down on any new non-residential development, non-residential facility that uses more than 200,000 gallons of water per day. And as she said in her statement, this facility could use between 1 and 2 million gallons of water per day, which runs headlong into the wall of the drought that we are experiencing here in Salt Lake City. So I'm curious if you want to, if you have any comments about that. I want to hear those. Leave those in the chat and I'll get to them. The Piece of Wild Things on Instagram says, I think a potential detention facility in Georgia was blocked using a similar route. Mayors are sharing and discussing how to use similar tactics across the country. And that's where I'm struggling to put this into words, but that's where who your local leaders are matter. Your local leaders, the people, as Republican legislators like to say, the officials closest to the people govern best. Well, you've got a city mayor helping to set policy for the city that she's been elected to run. And I don't know how the legislature is going to react to this. It doesn't impact them, but it will certainly impact DHS. And I do need to give a shout out to Building Salt Lake. I'm going to pull this up real quick, this article. I should have pulled this up earlier. But over at Building Salt Lake, they had a great story just about how much they overpaid for this. And it's by Jacob Scholl. I worked with him previously. I think he's a really great reporter. He does a great job. And he was looking at how much DHS paid for this warehouse. And they paid $145.44 million for 833,000 square feet. The estimated value of the building was $97 million, so they overpaid by at least $50 million, for $48 million over the estimated assessed value. But when comparing this purchase to others ICE had recently made, the federal government paid much more for this Utah real estate than to other purchases around the country. According to this report, and Jacob Scholl over at Building Salt Lake, he says ICE paid a little over $174 per square foot for the Salt Lake City building. They reviewed other purchases around the country where ICE has purchased these warehouses, and they found that they were far lower than what they paid here in Salt Lake City. So somebody in Salt Lake City got paid $174 per square foot. They said that a Salt Lake City real estate broker who spoke on the condition of anonymity, and you understand why, they said that price that ICE paid for this facility, $147 per square foot, was, quote, unheard of in the Salt Lake City market. So, somebody is making out like a bandit with your tax dollars, because $145 million for this warehouse, $48 million over its estimated value, and what they paid for it is unheard of. So I thought that was some really good reporting by Building Salt Lake and Jacob Scholl. Let's see, looking at some of the comments that have come in. Let's see. On TikTok, we hear from Bean.801, who says it's such a good move. Bravo, whoever brought this strategy to the table. It's that outside the box thinking to try and stop these things. Random Quaka on TikTok says, I also wonder about sewer capacity. When building probably didn't design sewer lines to handle that amount. What goes in must come out unless it's landscape or agriculture. Exactly. That's the other facility, and that's where a lot of this water use is going to be coming from, and capping it at whatever they're going to cap it at could really hamper their ability to put a detention facility in Salt Lake City. Let's see. Serald66 on YouTube says, I suspect DHS will truck water, porta potties, and sewage. Humane treatment is not a government strong point, and Cox lets us down like clockwork. They can certainly do that. And again, ICE has almost unlimited funding. They're funded better than a lot of armies in the world. So I can see why you would say that sort of thing. But, at least this looks to be a roadblock, at least in the short term, to putting this facility in Salt Lake City. Let's see. Some other questions. Someone here on Instagram says, R. Kalim says, chicanery is always referring to the sale, to be clear. Yeah, somebody made out like a bandit. And when you've got a state house full of real estate developers, I'm not saying that they were involved, but, somebody made quite a bit of money off of this deal. All right, a few people have asked for an update on what's happening with the Prop 4 repeal, so let's get into that. I've been running these numbers. I haven't been writing about it every single day, but as it stands right now, Prop 4 is still on track to make the ballot, but just barely. They've been processing a number of signature removals on Monday and Tuesday. The district that was in a critical phase, the one that was closest to falling below the threshold, is SD 15. There were no signature removals processed in SD 15 on Monday and Tuesday of this week. So they still have a buffer of 102 signatures, meaning 103 signature removals will get it off the ballot. But at the same time, a couple of other districts are now starting to fall into the danger area. Senate District 8, which is represented by Senator Todd Weiler. Hello, Senator Weiler. How are you today? That one had 124 signature removals today. And now that is putting that district in jeopardy. They have a surplus of 507 signatures. They are ones that has the third lowest buffer. So SD 15 right now has the smallest surplus of signatures at 102. 103 signature removals in SD 15, and the ballot initiative will fall below the threshold there, and then it will not qualify for the ballot. The next one is SD 12. I believe that one is Senator Karen Kwan. That one has a surplus of 453 signatures. And I'm not sure how many they lost today. I'll have to go back over those numbers, but they have a surplus of 453. And then SD 8 has a surplus of 507. So the one that is still closest to failing is Senate District 12, which is, Senate District 15, which is the district represented by Senator Kathleen Reeby. Elliot Nutter asks on TikTok, they have until April 22nd, right? Surely getting over 100 by then can be done. Yes, under state law, and this is something else that I've been tracking. Under state law, a person has 45 days after their name is posted online. All the signatures have been turned in, so all the names have been posted online. But if you count back 45 days ago, which was like February 8th, I believe, that is the start of the 45-day period. So if you look at people the ones that are still eligible, if you look at the number of signatures that were posted after February 8th and are still in that removal window as of today, in Senate District 15, there's still almost 3,200 names in that removal window. So they've got plenty of time to try and peel off 103. That's the number that they need to get to remove their signatures, 103. Actually, the 3,200 people, 3,200 names in that Senate district that are still in the window is actually 31 times higher than the surplus as it stands. So they've got 3,197 names that as of today were still in that removal window. The surplus is 102. That 3,200 signatures is 31 times the size of the surplus. So this is going to be, if you follow European soccer, they call it squeaky bum time. And that's what this is for the groups trying to put this repeal on the ballot, because this is one of the problems with waiting until the last second to collect your signatures and turn them all in, which is what Utahns for Representative Government did. They submitted tens of thousands of signatures right at the deadline. Well, the problem is, as those signatures were processed and verified, then as those names went on, the window for people to remove their signatures stretched out even farther. And so if you look at what happens in 2 days, right, according to my analysis, there's going to be about 1,100 people who sign the petition whose windows will expire. So that's 1,100 people across the entire state. The next day will be about 3,400, and then the day after that, March 28th, will be about 3,100. So the number of people who are going to start losing or falling out of that window, falling outside of that window to request that their signatures be removed is going to start to accelerate. But in the next week, that's going to be about 16,000 signatures are going to fall outside of that window. So now time is starting to tick to get those 103 signatures if they are going to block this from the ballot. And I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Focious World on Instagram says, apologies, just checking in, but how many names are still needed? I thought I saw they were just needing one more this morning. No, not one more. In Senate District 15, which is the closest to falling under the threshold for qualifying, they still need to peel off 103 signatures, which is where it was on Friday. As I said earlier, on Monday and Tuesday this week, according to the updated signature numbers, there were 0 signature removals processed for Senate District 15, and that's the one that's closest to falling off. Christy Withers says, why did Byrne get the numbers wrong? I don't know if they got the numbers wrong or not. They're probably counting people who have sent in their signature removal forms, but they haven't been processed yet because they do have to be processed by the county clerks. And at the same time, county clerks are processing signatures from candidates trying to get on the ballots. It's not just an automatic thing. So there's always going to be a lag. I don't know if they got the numbers wrong, but we'll have to see how that plays out. So that's what's happening with the Prop 4 repeal right now, where it looks like they're still technically they're still on the ballot right now, but it's on life support. They are in big trouble. They are in big trouble, and they need to somehow hope that 103 people do not request to have their signatures removed. Nathan Detroit, who's watching on Twitch, says, and this is funny, just joining, can you go over everything again that you've already talked about? This is a joke. Yes, I'm hoping that you're joking, because I'm not going to do that right now. But that's the update on the Prop 4 numbers. Again, I would expect that we'll start to see, and I don't have any particular insight into this yet, but I would suspect that it seems weird that they aren't getting any more signature removals in Senate District 15. We just didn't see any processed. None were processed on Friday and then reported on Monday. None were processed on Monday and then reported on Tuesday. So that's where things stand at this point. So anyway, if you have any questions, any comments, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. Debbie C on Instagram says, who do you think will win between Blake Moore and Carrie Ann Lisenby? They are 2 Republicans running in Senate in House District 2, the new House district. I don't know how this is going to play out. If you want to play it safe, you will say Blake Moore, because he's going to have more money than Carrie Ann Lisenby. He has arguably more name recognitions in that he has been in the House since 2021, elected in 2020. And those are 2 things that are very hard to overcome. It's usually pretty tough sailing for members of the Utah legislature to try and run for a higher office. Simply because nobody knows who the hell they are. They just don't. We saw it in 2024 with Brad Wilson. He ran for U.S. Senate. His supporters on the Hill were absolutely convinced that because of his work, his position as the Speaker of the House, it was going to just be easy sailing into that Republican nomination. But John Curtis got in the race. And John Curtis, while he may not have had more money than Wilson put about $5 million of his own personal money into the run. He did have the one thing that Brad Wilson did not, and that was name recognition. Nobody knew who Brad Wilson was, but they spend a lot of time at the legislature. You know, they win easily. They don't get challenged for re-election or have easy re-election bids, and then then they convince themselves that translates to a larger universe of voters. And I think what's going to happen is I don't see Carrie Ann Lisenby having that kind of broad appeal. Now, in that district, the Republican nomination race is going to be the election. It's almost impossible for a Democrat to win that race. If you look at the Cook Political Report, the PVI, which is the Partisan Voter Index, it's R plus 15, meaning a Republican candidate would be expected to do 15 points better than the national average. So that's going to be the election in that district. And Moore, who is a member of House leadership on the Republican side, I think he's like the number 5 or 6 Republican in the House. He's got a lot of resources, and he also has a lot of name recognition. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting is that Carrie Ann Lisenby's supporters are attacking Moore for his work with Better Boundaries. He was one of the original sponsors of Prop 4. He helped get Prop 4 on the ballot in 2018, and they're hitting him pretty hard for that. And that could be a vulnerability. I don't know how much of a vulnerability it is, but you are seeing them make arguments that Blake Moore should be running in House District 1. That's where he lives, actually. He does live in the new House District 1. But the reason why he's not running there is because there's no way that he would be able to win that seat. But you are seeing them make that argument. But that's where things stand in that race. I don't know how it's going to play out. I would expect Lisenby to do very well at the convention. Moore has never won the convention. He has always been forced into a primary. Every single time he's run, he was in a primary when he first ran, and he's been in a primary election every time since. But you do have to wonder if Lisenby, who is, she's one of the more extreme members of the Utah House of Representatives. If you look at some of the things that she has sponsored, she is one of the more ideologically extreme Republicans up on the Hill. And I just don't know how that's going to translate to a broader Republican electorate. But it's a good thing that Moore has already qualified. If you are a Moore supporter, it's a good thing that he's already qualified for the ballot through signatures, because, again, he's going to be forced into a primary at convention. So that's how that's going to play out. Let me see. Our column on Instagram says, any insight into how Lyman's signature gathering is going? I don't think he's turned anything in yet. I know he's posting about it a lot, but I don't see, he hasn't turned in any. And it also looks like Celeste Malloy has not turned in any yet. They did change the law that you can only turn in signatures on Fridays now, but you can track them as they go throughout the week. So you can, decide if you need to change tactics or focus on other areas to get signatures. But as it stands right now, they haven't turned any signatures in, or they haven't been processed. The deadline for them to do that is 2 weeks before the Republican primary, the Republican State Convention, which is on April 25th. And so that means that their deadline for turning in those signatures will be April 10th. That is the date that they have to get their 7,000 signatures in to qualify for the ballot. And, again, I expect Lyman to do well at convention. He's well liked among the convention crowd, and Malloy barely survived the convention in 2024. She was nearly eliminated by Colby Jenkins, who had been endorsed by Senator Mike Lee, and she then was endorsed by Burgess Owens at the convention, and I think she got 43% of the vote, which was just above where she would have been eliminated. And then she won the primary by just a handful of votes. So she's in for a dogfight. And as I wrote earlier, if you look at the way the district has shifted, a lot of the counties that she had in her old district north of Cedar City are no longer in that district, and now it spreads to the east and north along the eastern side of Utah. And so there's a lot of voters who have not had her on the ballot before. And that's got to be very concerning for her. But I expect this thing to be a dogfight and head down into and once again be a very, very close election. And again, that is another race that is likely going to be decided in the Republican nomination race because it has a Cook PVR of R+21. So let's see if there's any other questions out there. And if you have something you'd like to discuss, leave it in the chat and I will get to those questions. Elliot Nutter on TikTok. I don't know if Moore's Prop 4 issue will get enough people as not everyone is a single issue voter. Moore also has a voting record to run on. People say he's a rhino, but he's just not crazy MAGA. I agree with that. Moore has tried to be reasonable, but he also, if you look at some of the bills that he's recently signed on as a co-sponsor, they're among the more conservative base voter issues. He's recently signed on to the piece of legislation that would ban gender affirming care for minors nationwide and also allow for a lawsuit against doctors who performed transition surgeries. And I'm struggling with some of the terminology here, but I hope that you understand. I hope that you get what I'm talking about. That is a bill that was initially co-sponsored by Representative Mike Kennedy. I noticed last week that Moore signed on to that bill. And that is the kind of thing that he can then point to when he is trying to appeal to those base voters who are going to be at the convention and voting in a Republican primary. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I do expect that one. That's another one that is going to be a dogfight. Let's see. On TikTok, this is West Jordan Chris asks, curious to know my March Madness picks. I haven't filled out a bracket in decades. I used to obsess about March Madness, and now I'll turn the games on. I watch them when they're here in Salt Lake City. I will buy tickets and play hooky and just go sit in the arena. I love college basketball, but just I don't obsessively follow it, and I don't fill out a bracket. So I couldn't tell you who's going to win. I just surf around and like good games. I actually pay more attention to women's college basketball, and that's simply because my Oklahoma Sooners are pretty good, and Aaliyah Chavez is the real deal. She is really good, and just a freshman. She's going to be great. So that's mainly what I'm focusing on. Plus, we've got the World Cup coming. We've got the end of the Premier League race. There's a lot. My sports attention is split in a number of ways. And really, the other thing that I'm watching this time of year is college softball, because again, my Oklahoma Sooners, I really enjoy that team. They won 4 in a row, did not win the national championship last year, but this year they are hitting home runs at a pace that is astronomical. I think I read the other day that through 33 games so far this season, or however many games they played, it's 30 some, they have hit 127 home runs. The NCAA record for a season was the 2021 Oklahoma Sooners team that hit 161, and they're going to shatter that record if they stay at this pace. And someone broke down how many home runs every team in the Southeastern Conference has hit, and Oklahoma was first. And then if you just count the home runs hit by the freshmen on that team, they would be 4th in the conference. So it is an it's a lot of fun, and that's mostly what I'm paying attention to. Actually, on Saturday and Sunday, while there were college basketball games going on, I was watching college softball. So I can tell you that a lot of the people who are screaming about protect women's sports up at the Capitol, they're not paying attention to women's sports. It's an easy thing to demagogue about, but put money where your mouth is. I remember a couple of years ago, when I still had season tickets to the Utah Royals, I had an open invitation to any member of the legislature if they wanted to come with me. Nobody ever took me up on that. None of them. All of the people screaming about wanting to protect women's sports, you're not going to catch them dead at a Utah Royals match. You're just not, because it's a lot easier to demagogue over this issue than to actually put your money where your mouth is. Side note, I don't have season tickets to the Royals anymore because it's not fun watching a team just get their brains beat in game after game after game. Put a better product on the field and you'll get more people there. It's really kind of sad. Elliot Nutter, also tangent, but are you tuned into the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Bachelorette drama? Just everything that I've learned about the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and Taylor Frankie Paul has been against my will. Everything I've learned has been completely against my will. I'm not surprised that her season of The Bachelor got shelved, but come on, they knew what they were getting. They knew what they were getting. And the fact that this happened, I don't feel sorry for anyone. I really don't. Okay. So hopefully that answers those questions. Any other comments? Go ahead, leave them in the chat and I will get to them as quickly as possible. Kathy on YouTube says, when does the city council vote on the water issue? I think they're voting on it tonight. If you're just tuning in, Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall has proposed a change to the city ordinances that would crack down on water use by large non-residential facilities, and this could potentially block the new ice facility on the west side of Salt Lake City. She estimates that facility would use between 1 and 2 million gallons of water per day, and Salt Lake City's in the middle of a drought, and by comparison, the warehouse before DHS bought it was using 5,600 gallons per day. And if you're going to put 7,500 people there as a detention facility, what this thing was not designed for, turn it into a detention facility, you're going to need water to run it. And the city council is considering an ordinance change that would crack down on water use by these large facilities. And it could potentially block this from going into effect. So, I don't know if you saw this story. Let me take a little drink here. I've been talking I get off on these tangents, talk for 40 some minutes, and then I need to take a drink because your voice starts to give out. But I wrote a story earlier this week, and it kind of fascinated me because it's really interesting how Utah Republicans have long fought against the signature gathering path to the ballot. They don't like it. Back in 2014, let's go back to the beginning of this whole thing. Back in 2014, the Utah legislature passed SB 54, which created the dual path to the primary ballot. Candidates could either collect signatures, a certain number of signatures to get on the ballot, or go through the traditional caucus and convention system, or both. The reason they passed that bill is because a group called Count My Vote was threatening to run or planning to run a ballot initiative that would have moved Utah to a direct primary, meaning the only way that you could get on the ballot would be to collect signatures. It would completely remove the caucus and convention system from the party nomination process. And opinion polls at the time showed that if that initiative had gotten on the ballot, it would have passed. So in order to save the caucus and convention system, lawmakers compromised with Count My Vote and passed SB 54. So that's how we got to this point with the signature gathering. Ever since then, Republican base voters, Republican delegates, have been trying to get rid of the signature path, have been trying to block it. There have been a couple of attempts to repeal SB 54 up on the Hill. Those have always either failed to pass one house or the other, never got all the way to the governor's desk. They have been trying to get rid of this law for years. And in some places, they absolutely hate signature gathering candidates and want to punish them. The thing is, under state law, they can't punish them because they are protected under state law. There are two classifications of political parties. There is a registered political party, which you'll hear people say RPP, and qualified political party, which QPP. If a political party wants to use the caucus and convention system, they become a QPP, a qualified political party, where they can nominate candidates through the caucus and convention system, but they must also allow for signatures. Otherwise, it's signatures only. If you want to use the caucus and convention system, you have to allow signatures. And the signature path is protected in state law. But the caucus and convention path is not. And so this focus on political purity, that's one of the reasons why Republicans want to get rid of the signature path, because they only want quote unquote real Republicans running. So this focus on political purity, it's going to literally knock a convention only candidate off of the ballot and hand the Republican nomination to a signature gathering candidate for state school board. And I hope you read this story, but if not, that is all prelude to this story. Last year, the Utah Republican Party adopted a new bylaw and an amendment to the party constitution, the rules of the party, that said, if you want to run for office as a Republican, then you must be registered as a Republican for a full year, meaning you will have gone through at least one election cycle, either local election or a regular election, as a registered Republican. The reason that they did that is because in 2024, December 2024, like a couple of days after Christmas, then Representative Kara Birkeland suddenly resigned from the legislature. She had just been reelected about a month and a half earlier. And then all of a sudden she resigned from the legislature. And so that means that Republicans got to pick her replacement. And in that special election, where the delegates were the only ones who got to vote, in that special election, the Democrat she had defeated in November switched parties, became a Republican, and tried to run to replace her in the legislature. That gambit didn't work. They ended up electing Tiara Oxier in that seat instead of the Democrat who became a Republican. But in response to that, the Republicans passed these new rules that said in order to run as a Republican candidate, you must be registered as a Republican for a full year. So fast forward. In State School Board District 8, which covers parts of Kearns, Taylorsville, and South Jordan, I believe, it's currently represented by Christina Bogus, who is not running for another term on the state school board. She's not running, and so two Republicans jumped into the race. Trina Christensen and, let's see, the other name is Trina Christensen and Nicole McDermott are the two Republicans running. And this is a heavily Republican seat. It's likely that whoever wins the nomination is going to win the seat on the state school board. Well, Trina Christensen, when she filed, she said, I'm only going to do the convention. She is a convention-only candidate, and that will be at the Salt Lake County Convention. Meanwhile, Nicole McDermott is doing both convention and signatures. Well, here's the problem. Trina Christensen was not a Republican until she filed to run for that office. She changed her party affiliation around the same time that she filed to run on the Republican as a Republican for state school board. But nobody said anything at the time. She started campaigning and nobody said anything. Nobody made any objection until just, her campaign manager told me that they started to hear there might be a problem with this right at the last day of the legislature. One of the people who pointed out this problem was her opponent, Nicole McDermott. Well, Trina Christensen clearly does not meet the rule that they just passed that said you have to be a Republican for a full year to run. So she has been informed that she will not be allowed to participate in the Salt Lake County Convention to compete for the nomination. And this is kind of and essentially that hands the nomination to her opponent, Nicole McDermott. Now, if you look at some of Trina Christensen's supporters, it's people on the far right. It's very conservative Republicans and people on the far right who want her on the state school board. Unfortunately, they approve this rule that says you have to be Republican for a full year. So this quest to make sure only real Republicans are running is going to knock someone who is trying to do what the Republican base voters want, which is only use the convention system to try to win the nomination. It's going to knock her out of the race. It's a gray area in state law. They could not do this to a signature gathering candidate, or if they tried to do it to a signature gathering candidate, the candidate still has the signature path to get on the ballot, and it would also probably jeopardize the Republican Party's access to the ballot, because state law says you must, if you're going to use the convention system, you have to also allow signature gathering. And so if they tried to do this, it would be highly illegal. But the fact, state law says nothing about what parties can do to convention-only candidates, if they can block convention-only candidates, which is what they are doing here. Her campaign manager said to me that he was baffled by how the party is interpreting this rule. But if you look at how it's written, it's pretty cut and dried, that you have to be registered as a Republican. So someone who would be popular among the delegates, someone who would be supported by the delegates because she's very conservative. I believe she teaches music at one of the right-wing charter schools, is not going to be allowed to be is not going to be allowed to compete for the Republican nomination simply because she has not been a Republican for a full year because of this rule change that they did last year. So that's unintended consequences. I don't think that they, obviously it's an unintended consequence because they didn't think that this was going to be interpreted this way, but it's going to punish a convention-only candidate and hand the nomination to a signature gathering candidate. And I think that that is quite ironic. And this is not the only one. This is not the only candidate. Been looking over some of the voting records, and a person who's running for Salt Lake County Sheriff, Shane Manwaring, convention only registered to become a Republican when they filed for office. They were not a Republican, not for a full year. He should be ineligible to run for office. And the Salt Lake County Republican Party won't tell me whether or not they're going to block this person from the ballot. But if you look at the rules, they should block this person from the ballot. So that's a story I had earlier this week. And I just find that extremely ironic that Republicans, in this manic quest to for party purity, to make sure only real Republicans are on the ballot, are going to knock someone who's completely bought into the caucus and convention system out of the race because of this rule. Serald66 on YouTube says the live Salt Lake City Council meeting is streaming now. They're taking public comments. The water usage gambit is item number 3. They're on item number 1. So they will be trying to they will be trying to pass that this evening. They should probably try to do that sooner rather than later. JK7771 on YouTube says, when was the last time there was an independent in the state legislature? How have independents fared in Utah politics and the legislature messaging and reform? I really can't remember the last time. There have been sitting lawmakers who have changed their party affiliation, but not to independent. If you remember, at the end of the 2025 session, the very last day, Republican Senator Daniel Thatcher changed to the Forward Party and then resigned, and so the Forward Party got to pick his replacement, and that led to Emily Buss, who is state senator for this term, and she's running for re-election under the Forward Party, but that's going to be a real tall order. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens with the Forward Party, because they're having their state convention on April 11th, and Andrew Yang, who's one of the founders of the party, is coming out for that. Last year, when they had their very first convention and merged with the United Utah Party, they had Christine Todd Whitman, who was also one of the founders of the Forward Party. So he's going to be here for that. I haven't heard anything about big guests for the Republican or the Democratic state convention, so I don't know how that's going to play out. Gabriel on YouTube says, the punitive rules we put in place are coming back to bite us. Yeah, that's kind of what happens. And it is ironic. The best part of this whole thing is there's a guy by the name of Aaron Bullen, and he is one of these rules and regulations warriors in the Republican Party. And he's the one who sponsored this rule change to make sure that you've been registered as a Republican for years. And he had a quote when they sold this to the delegates at the state convention last year, because the delegates had to put it into the state constitution. In the handout, his quote was, I fundamentally believe someone's first act as Republican should not be to run for elected office. Well, Aaron, you got what you wanted. And now someone who, frankly, Trina Christensen's politics would align quite nicely with Aaron Bullen's politics. But because of this rule change that Aaron Bullen rammed through, because of one ultra-specific situation in which somebody tried to run as change parties and run as a Republican to win, everybody flipped out, so they had to stop the party interlopers and change this rule. Now it's going to knock someone out of the race. And also, by passing this rule, it kind of fundamentally, they're treating their own voters as stupid by saying you won't know whether someone is changing their party affiliation to become a Republican. So we need to put this rule in place to make sure that they're a Republican for a full year. That's insulting the intelligence of their voters, in my opinion. I think it's kind of an insulting thing. It's very infantilizing. It's very, we know better than you. You don't do enough research. But what happened in practice in this very specific situation where the Democrat changed their party affiliation to become a Republican, the delegates who were voting on the replacement for Kara Birkeland sniffed that out immediately. They saw through it immediately. That person didn't survive the first ballot. I don't even know if they got any votes on the first ballot. So, they decided to put a draconian measure in place, and now it's going to impact one of their own. They can't do, and it's hilarious to me, because they can't do anything to punish signature gathering candidates. I've talked about this before, but up in Davis County, Representative Raymond Ward is only gathering signatures to run for re-election, and he's unopposed, and I think he's almost got enough. Actually, he has submitted enough signatures to qualify for the ballot, so he's going to win re-election. He's not going to convention. And the way that he was treated in the 2022 and 2024 Davis County conventions, I don't blame him. But they are so angry. The Davis County Republican Party is furious that he's not going to come to convention, so they can't boo him and yell at him. He doesn't need to. And he's the only candidate in the race. And they can't touch him, and it drives them crazy. They cannot lay a finger on him because he's unopposed and he's doing signatures only. So, anyway, Sirald has one of my favorite quotes from Pericles. Just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. I think the modern equivalent of that is, if you don't learn it, you're going to feel it. If you don't learn it, you're going to feel it. If you don't pay attention to politics, you are going to feel it. So, yeah. Our column says, do you have to be a Republican for a full year to be a delegate? Yes. There is a deadline for changing your party affiliation to become a delegate, to become or hold an elected position in the party, usually legislative district chair or Senate district chair. Someone messaged me on one of the social media apps this week and said they ended up becoming a state delegate, a county delegate, and their ledge chair because they were the only person in the Republican Party who showed up for their caucus. They've been in the Republican politics for years, but they were the only person who showed up. So by default, they are a delegate for the state convention and the county convention, and they are apparently the legislative district chair as well. You just got to show up sometimes. But yes, there is a rule, and that's one of the reasons why the Republicans they instituted an app to check someone's party registration to make sure that you are a registered Republican, not just changed your party affiliation to run as a delegate. They're very, very worried about party raiders, and that's where I think this sort of thing would have the most impact, is if Democrats wanted to cause some problems, they could become Republican delegates, and that's one of the reasons why they changed the rules. I'll be fascinated to see what happens in the Democratic primary in the new 1st Congressional District, which is covering most of Salt Lake County, because Republican primaries are closed. You have to be a registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary, but the Democratic primary is open. Anybody can vote in the Democratic primary. So that just so long as you don't vote in somebody else's primary. So that means that Democrats, independents, and even Republicans can vote in that primary. And that's going to be fascinating to watch, because it is not going to be just Democrats who choose the nomination in that district. And that's where what I've been talking about on previous live streams, building a coalition, comes into play. And there's going to be multiple candidates in this primary. Ben McAdams has already qualified. Nate Bluen is on the verge of qualifying through signatures. You'll probably see a couple of others. Let me look at some of the signature totals. Liban Mohammed, he's got 2,200 signatures. He needs 7,000. Time is ticking, but you would expect him to qualify. Ava Lopez has 3,370 signatures. Again, you need 7,000. And we're seeing Kathleen Reby has only turned in 490. Michael Farrell has 685. I would expect 3, maybe 4. The convention could put somebody through as well who didn't qualify by signature. So it's going to be a crowded primary field, and it's not just going to be Democrats voting on this nomination. It's going to be Democrats and independents, and again, even Republicans, so long as they do not cast a ballot in the Republican primary. And you could see extremely low turnout for that Republican primary. The candidates there, the Republicans running in that race, are There's 5 of them: Dave Robinson, Riley Owen, Jonathan Lopez, Stone Fanua, and Adam Clayton. So there's 5 Republicans in the race, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 Democrats. But the show this year is in the Democratic primary. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, because it's not just it's not just Democrats who are going to be deciding this nomination. Kathy Chris says, Elevate Utah did a great deal about how switching to R in hopes of moderating the state does not work. Yeah, I'm sure that they did. I have been reporting on that for years, about how there's no evidence that shows that Democrats really had any impact on Republican elections, or there's not a huge number of Democrats who switch their party affiliation. Elevate Utah, they do some good work, but they're relying on other people's reporting for a lot of their content. I just wish that they would credit people more. R. Callum says, thanks. I went to caucus night for the first time, and they asked potential delegates how long they'd been Republicans. I assumed it was a loyalty test. Interesting that it's more than that. They would have checked your registration when you walked in the door. That's one of the things that they that's part of this technological app that they put in place, because they're trying to weed out party raiders who are coming in. So there's a question here. Let me see. Oh, Elliot Nutter on TikTok says, thoughts about the Lieutenant Governor calling out the SAVE Act and Mike Lee on social media recently. I say good for her, because the SAVE Act is one of the most buffoonishly transparent attempts at ballot rigging, at election rigging, I have seen in a long time. Every argument that Senator Lee has used for this act, for this SAVE Act, is disingenuous. When you see people claiming, well, you have to show ID to buy a beer and drive a car, you don't have a constitutional right to buy a beer. And in those cases, a driver's license is just fine. In those cases, a driver's license is fine, but not under Senator Lee's proposal. The only forms of ID that would be valid would either be a passport or your birth certificate. And if your name now does not match the name on either of those documents, you would be ineligible to vote. And that could potentially disenfranchise 10% of the American population, because a passport is expensive and it takes months to get. And there are women who took their husbands' names when they got married, and now they don't have their name on the birth certificate. And then someone raised this issue the other day. What about people who were in closed adoptions and don't have access to their birth certificate? They could potentially be disenfranchised as well. Senator Mike Lee waves it off, saying that's just fear-mongering. It's not fear-mongering. He is trying to gaslight you with this. So I commend her for pushing back against this transparent and blatant attempt to try and manipulate the election, try and manipulate the voter rolls or vote who's eligible to vote. It's an attempt to narrow the pool of who can vote. And this whole thing is being spearheaded by Cleta Mitchell. Senator Mike Lee and Cleta Mitchell have been joined at the hip for years. Cleta Mitchell was one of the Trump lawyers who was on that phone call in Georgia where he had asked Brad Raffensperger to find him 11,700 votes so he could win Georgia. She was on that call. She has been big in the election denial community. She and Mike Lee have been very close for years. Mike Lee was in almost constant contact with her leading up to the January 6th insurrection, when he was working 14 hours a day, 20 hours a day, whatever it was, trying to find a way to help Donald Trump overturn his election loss to Joe Biden. And then it came out, the Senate Republicans, I don't know if you saw this today, but they released the warrant that Jack Smith, the records that they were trying to get from members of Congress. And one of the people that one of the people they were trying to get the phone records from was Mike Lee. And if you look at the warrant, one of the reasons it says we intend to obtain the following phone records. Mike Lee, he contacted Giuliani on 1/6, lots of texts with Mark Meadows, calls with John Eastman, calls with Meadows, calls with Chip Roy, Cleta Mitchell. And Cleta Mitchell is one of the ones she's with this group who the Election Integrity Network is her organization. It's just a bunch of election deniers. And what they're trying to do is narrow the pool of eligible voters. Why? Because then you're going to cut down on people who could vote against Donald Trump and the Republicans. They know that the president is historically unpopular right now. If you look at his approval ratings, they are in the toilet. Now, a lot of stuff could change between now and November, but Democrats are winning special elections all across the board. Just tonight, the Democrats won a special election for Florida legislature. They flipped the seat previously held by a Republican that includes Mar-a-Lago. So now Donald Trump is going to be represented in the Florida legislature by a Democrat. And this is someone this has been a Republican seat for years, and Democrats flipped it. There is a lot of things going against the Republicans right now, and they know it. And that's why Senator Lee's SAVE Act is just a cartoonish attempt to try and stave off an aggressive ass paddling at the polls in 2026. Now, a lot can happen between now and then, but the way things are trending right now, it's not good. Your mom on TikTok says they can cancel passports. They're asking for voter rolls. Yes, that's one of the things that they're trying to do. That's why the Justice Department sued Utah. They're trying to get the entire voter roll here. And the people who are pushing back, Governor Henderson, who is being sued by the Department of Justice, says they have no legal basis to request these voter rolls. The NAACP also intervened into the case, and their new filing calls the Trump administration out for doing what they're trying to do, which is establish a national voter database, which they have no authority to do under the Constitution. The Constitution says that individual states are responsible for running elections, administering elections. They have to do voter rolls, but they are the ones in charge of it. So that's one of the reasons. So, I applaud Lieutenant Governor Henderson for pushing back against Senator Mike Lee because he knows that he's lying about what his act does. He knows that he's lying, but he doesn't care. He does not care. He knows what it would do. That's why he's trying to run it. It's not about election integrity. Undocumented immigrants, foreigners do not vote in American elections. There's just no evidence that that's happening on even a limited scale. Maybe here and there, but that's about it. It's not the problem that they're making it out to be. Katie Did It 124 on YouTube says, can candidates who drop out of a race gift their signature list to another candidate? No, they can't. And the problem is all of the people who signed that petition cannot sign for another candidate. Once you sign a petition for one candidate in a race, you cannot sign for another candidate. So if you do sign for another candidate, they're going to throw that out. That's one of the things that happens in the signature verification process. So you can't sign for multiple candidates, and they can't gift their signatures to another candidate. So if they drop out, those signatures go to waste. So Gabriel on YouTube says, you have a sense on how the heightened gas prices might impact the elections in Utah? The legislature tried doing something about gas tax, if I recall. Yes, they did pass a temporary gas tax holiday. I don't know how much of an impact that is going to have, especially if you follow open source intelligence online. It sure as heck looks like the Trump administration is preparing to put boots on the ground in Iran, a ground invasion in Iran. I hope these people are wrong. I fear that they're not. With all of the people and material and support that is moving in that direction. If you look at the timeline, and if you're looking for a great breakdown of this, there's some few people on TikTok that I follow who can explain this a lot better than I can. One of them on TikTok is called the Under Report. So if you're on TikTok, go to the Under Report. He's worked in national intelligence. He's worked in foreign intelligence. He's worked in foreign countries for U.S. intelligence. Highly educated, very good at explaining this sort of thing. His timeline says we might see boots on the ground or an attempt to take Karg Island in the Persian Gulf, just off the coast of Iran, by Friday. That's when he expects that might happen. A couple of others. There's another one by the name of Geo Hussar, Geohussar. Very smart, very good at breaking down a lot of these international issues. And then I'm forgetting the other person's name. I'll try to put together a list and put it out on my social media. But yeah, that's there's some really informative places out there to get some of these information. To get this information, these people can explain it a lot better than I can. Looking over some of the comments on Instagram, let's see. Our column says they checked registration. This is about attending the Republican caucuses. But when it came time to vote for delegates, the precinct chair asked how long potential delegates had been in the party. Yeah, they are very, very focused on how long you've been a Republican. And I can see the pros and cons of that. It does limit participation by people who, maybe this is their first caucus and, they want to get involved. But it kind of is a roadblock that they put up against that. France Burrell says, would election integrity include election influence by PAC, dark money, or foreign government? Well, first of all, no, because PACs are legal. Dark money is legal. Foreign government influence in election, well, that's supposed to be illegal. Foreign governments can't contribute. We do know that the Russians did interfere in 2016 and 2020, just like and I'm sure Iran and other countries did as well. So I don't know if that. Sure, you could make the argument that that's election integrity, but that's not covered by Senator Lee's bill at all. That's not what he's trying to do. Our column says the fact that even the Heritage Foundation couldn't find evidence of non-citizen voting says a lot. That and you would think that Senator Mike Lee would listen to the Heritage Foundation because he loves the Heritage Foundation. Like, he loves that organization. Almost all of his staffers either come from the Heritage Foundation or leave his office to go to the Heritage Foundation. He's kind of a revolving door. So anyway, let's see. Serald on YouTube says, I suspect Iran will charge exorbitant fees on passage through the Strait of Hormuz to all shipping to recover their losses from the war. They'll be passed on to the markets, and we'll feel it in Utah. We're gonna feel it. We're gonna feel everything. We're gonna feel everything. I saw a creator, I believe on TikTok tonight, who said they were laying out an argument about the economy, and they said we did not have a bad economy under Joe Biden. He was addressing this to Trump supporters. He said, Donald Trump convinced you that we had a bad economy, and you voted for him because, frankly, you're stupid. Now we're about to find out what a bad economy is. And it's things, all the economic indicators. I mean, really, the only thing that's propping up the economy is sort of like AI and big tech. And that's just a bubble. And if you look at the money that's flowing about AI, it's just all these companies just buying from each other. That's and AI data centers. You can't run an economy on that for long. So it's probably going to get bad. I would expect we're going to hit a full-blown recession, especially if we start a ground war in Iran. It's just, wow. I mean, that's about all I can say. There are people who are smarter than me who can talk about this a lot better than I can. Okay, well, that's probably going to do it for me this evening. I've talked for more than an hour here, almost an hour and a half. I really appreciate you along for the ride tonight. You'll see on the screen all of my social handles where you can follow my content. If you're looking for more, you can follow those there. Also, my email, I decided to put that on the screen now as well. Feel free to email me with questions, comments, anything you want me to address on a future live stream. We'll probably do this. We may do this again later this week, depending on what happens. But at least we have this one, and I'll try to edit it and put it out as a podcast tomorrow. Cable, okay, I love this. Cable Ascani 41 on TikTok says, as your editor, I am still waiting for pictures of Spider-Man. That was from our discussion last week about the oral arguments in front of the 10th Circuit Court in my appeal of the case to get a media credential with the Utah legislature. They refused to do it. I did post this on social media. It was 1 year ago today, and you can go find this. In fact, I might actually just put the link in the chat for everyone. But it was 1 year ago today that I published a story that has audio of Senator Todd Weiler saying the quiet part out loud. He was recorded speaking to a group. They asked him why independent journalists were not allowed to be at the Capitol. And what he said was, quote, there's only one independent journalist that wasn't given credentials, and he's kind of burned some bridges with some of the House and Senate leadership. They don't feel like he's particularly honest. I think the legislative leadership is showing who's the boss. He went on to say he kind of likes to poke people in the eyes, and if you do that long enough, sometimes it comes back at you. In my opinion, that's what's happened. 1 year ago today, I published that recording of Senator Weiler saying the quiet part out loud. Let me just put this in the chat for everyone if you're interested in reading that story. So I'm putting that one over there in the chat, and I'll put it in the chat here on TikTok, and then I'll put it in the chat on Instagram if you are interested in reading that story and listening to the recording, because the recording is there. And it's Senator Todd Weiler saying the quiet part out loud. That I rubbed some people the wrong way with my reporting. Sorry. I'm not going to stop just so I can get a media credential. That's called, it's like I said, I don't like the taste of boots. I don't like it. Anyway, all right, now as we wrap up here, here's my pitch. If you want to support what I do as an independent journalist, go to my website, utahpolitics.news. You can sign up for my newsletter for free. You can also, if you want to, throw a couple of bucks at me. There's a tip jar. You can also become a paying subscriber for $5 a month. You'll get some subscriber-only stories and a few extra things as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time asking for your support. If you like what I do, it's important that you, as consumers of this news, support it. I don't have corporate backing. I don't have a billionaire writing me checks. It's me and y'all, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think that's going to do it for this evening. Anyway, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your attention. Again, you'll see all my handles on the screen if you want to follow me there. And you can also send me an email. Email's right there on the screen. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, thank you so much for your support and your attention, and I hope you all have a great night, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks.